Welcome to the Christian Business Leader Podcast, where Christ-following business leaders explore God's will and ways for business. This show is a ministry of the Center for Christianity and Business at Houston Christian University and features conversations with today's Christ-centered business leaders who are representing Christ faithfully in the business world. I'm your host, Darren Shear, and if you want to make your work, leadership, and company's culture more Christ-centered, you've come to the right place. On this episode, we're joined by Scott Gates. Scott is president of Awake Window and Door Company. Awake is more than a fast-growing U.S. manufacturer of high-performance windows and doors. It's a company grounded in the power of redemption and second chances. Under Scott's leadership, Awake has grown into a $30 million company, partnering with top builders and architects nationwide. Actually partnered up with Jerry Meek, one of our Highbridge Books authors, who has a great construction company out there in the Scottsdale, Phoenix area. And you're supplying windows to them. That's awesome. And what truly sets Awake apart is its bold hiring model. More than half of its workforce is made up of formerly incarcerated individuals. Scott, welcome to the Christian Business Leader Podcast.
Oh, thanks for having us. Super excited to be here and love that you guys always share such great stories about good Christian business leaders out there.
So when did you first realize God wants to be involved in your work in business?
Well, it's interesting. I grew up in a Christian household. God's obviously been a huge part of my life, and I've worked for many Christian business leaders myself. So it's always interesting to see how do you bring it into the workplace? And throughout my career, especially as I became the leader in charge, it's that fine line of, I don't want to be forcing things on you, but how do I let my values and, the things that define me as a person shape the way I lead, make God contagious? And that was really kind of always my goal in businesses that weren't my own. How do I let my Christian values be reflected and, make the kingdom look appealing to other people, right? But in 2020, I had just gone through an acquisition at my old company. I decided I wanted to be truly an entrepreneur and start my own company. And that's where things felt a little bit different. I felt like we could be a little bit more forward and missional than maybe we had ever been before. And I think that intention was, God had laid something on our heart, and it was this people group. And we realized, let's build a business around helping a group of people that tend to really struggle, tend to get overlooked. And let's not be shy about it. Let's make it very clear, this is who we are. This is why we exist. And hopefully, if anybody wants to know why, we'll tell them because that's what God commands us to do.
Yeah. Was there a particular person or situation that happened that really just awakened this desire to make this central to your business model?
It's a great question. And people ask that a lot, almost like there's an assumption of, did I have a personal connection to someone who had been incarcerated? And it's actually the opposite. I grew up in a home where my dad was a police officer, my uncle was a police officer, my brother's a police officer. I just grew up in a cop family. But I think, and not to any fault of theirs, but I think sometimes you grow up and you look at things as more binary than they are. There's good guys and bad guys, right? But then in my time at my previous company, as we were growing and the economy was really, really strong in the mid-2000s or 2010s, it was really difficult to find labor at our manufacturing facility. And we sometimes would have to turn to temporary agencies because we were just growing so fast. And oftentimes the individuals that are working at those temp agencies, they often are there because they have a criminal record. And they're really struggling to find work. And as I would interview them or get to know them, the stigma around, oh, this is a bad guy versus this is just a person who's trying to help their family, to turn their life around. That was my first, I'd say, real exposure And it really started to shift my perspective. And that coupled with a couple different key moments where conferences I was at, books that I read, podcasts that I listened to, I really felt like God was working on me to pay attention to this people group. And then my wife was kind of on the same journey with me. And, our heart began to be broken as you really read more and more and listen. There's a lot of complications with our justice system, especially when people get out of prison. And one of the things that broke my heart was learning that, 50% of people end up back in prison within 5 years. And the main reason is because they can't find employment. And we just started to realize, well, maybe we're supposed to do something about that. And that was what we felt God was leading us to.
Yeah. I've heard a great quote. I cannot remember who originally said it, but what people need is Jesus and a job.
Mhm.
Um, and that statistic makes perfect sense. I mean, if you know that, I mean, your fallback plan is to go back into prison where at least you're going to get 3 square meals a day and a roof over your head. I mean, it's not, I guess, not so bad. Uh, maybe I have not experienced prison, but I know that it's no place that I or anyone else wants to be. But maybe, hey, if you get that desperate
Yeah.
and you can't get work, I mean, what are you gonna do?
Well,
Uh,
it's like, it's humbling to me. You, especially now at our new company, getting to know so much of our staff and their stories. You hear a lot about prison, and you probably heard the term before about people getting like institutionalized, where, the guys go in. Like, one of the things that really was overwhelming to me as you read about these issues, most criminal behavior happens in late teenage years and early 20s. And then just the curve drops so dramatically as people get older because they get wiser, they lose their edge that sometimes drives these things. And a lot of these guys that are getting out that have been there 8 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, they don't even really, I mean, think how much the world changes in
mm,
20 years. But the first key step they need before they can actually get their life going is steady work. And man, I'm thinking of one guy on our staff right now. I remember him telling me, I have applied for 400 jobs.
oh my
And
goodness.
he's like, I got to the final interview stage. He's like, no less than 25 times. They love me. They wanted to hire me, but then they see this thing on my record and they stop listening to any of the context or any of my story. They just decide, yeah, you're not a fit for us. And I'm telling you, for us, he's been an incredible employee, right?
Mm,
And I think what's hard, and this is like one thing I always, whenever I'm talking to anybody about this people group, it's always trying to remind them that in our justice system, which is designed to be, punishing and also reforming, they have paid their debt to society and done their time. Once they are out, if we aren't willing to hire them, then they can't function, right? And if they have already paid their debt, I understand that there may be something in their past that makes people uncomfortable or nervous or fearful, but the justice system has already decided the fact that they're out, they shouldn't be those things. And I think realizing as an entrepreneur and as a business leader that that responsibility falls on us was humbling to me. And it's why I'm always passionate about trying to share these stories, the success of it, so that other business leaders might think differently too.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, without a higher purpose for your company beyond just improving your profit margins or, getting more revenue, I mean, why would you? Why would you go hire somebody that has a history that and you don't know them and not well enough to take that risk? Whereas, if all things being equal, you have a choice between somebody that seems qualified. They seem like they're able-bodied. They seem like they can do the job and pass the aptitude tests or whatever. But they've got the record. And then somebody who also has all of those same skills, they don't have the record. Like, who wouldn't hire the person that doesn't have the
And I think
record?
that question is a good one. And I think it's why most leaders or HR or hiring managers default to that position because it just makes sense, right? So what we decided to do from the beginning was to say, hey, this is our mission and this is why we exist. So not in a like reverse discrimination way, but in a, hey, we are intentionally trying to do this. So we're going to be on the lookout and not just communicating to this people group, hey, we're willing to consider you here, but instead saying we exist for you.
Hmm.
So tell your friends, tell your parole officers. We're a place that really, we felt like God wanted us to start a company to hire this people group. And what has been incredible for me as a CEO and a business leader, along with my co founders, is leading a company where the mission is the driving force changes everything. So, we've grown really fast. We're setting records for fastest growing companies and profit. But when we talk to our sales team so we do a thing every every month where we have an all hands lunch and we get everybody together and there's a lot of storytelling about our staff and letting everybody get to know them, know their story, where they've come from, how they've turned their lives around. Well, this becomes then the heartbeat of everybody working there of like, man, I love hearing about Jessica or David or Ralph or any of these people. And then the sales team, when we go to budget for the year, they're not only thinking about growth because it means higher commissions or higher pay. They're thinking, man, if we grow another 20%, how many more people like Jessica do we get to hire? Right. And for me, I've never felt such an urgency to want to grow a company because we literally right now have a waiting list, Darren, of like 25 people pre-qualified who just desperately want to work here. And we're trying to grow fast enough so we can hire all of them. Um, and that's the type of thing that having a mission-driven company lights up and energizes the entire team in a way that I've never experienced before.
Yeah. Do you ever have people, because you can't hire everybody and you got a waiting list. Do you ever have people who don't have a record that get upset with you and accuse you of reverse discrimination
No, that's a
because
good
they don't
question.
have a
And
record? 'But
so,
you've got it in your founding documents, right? This is why
yes.
we exist. It's like if a company, like one that I interviewed, Sight and Sound Theater, is a for-profit company, and they hire Christians because they need
Mhm.
Christians to, fill these roles. They got 600 employees. They can do that because it's in the founding documents.
Yep.
It sounds
And
like it's
so right now, the breakup of our staff is about around 56% of them have a record. So the other 44 don't. So, but when we are in the hiring process, one of the things we really drill in on is our mission. And what we're trying to see is, hey, because it's also not everybody wants to work alongside someone who has a record. Um, and we're not really looking to, lecture them or tell them that they're wrong. To each their own on their own perspectives and the type of work environment they want to be in. But our staff that doesn't have a record, part of the reason why they want to work at Awake is they want to be a part of a company that's helping make a difference for people that they know tend to struggle in the world, right? So we intentionally, when we're interviewing, our HR team doesn't actually inform the the hiring managers whether a person has a record or not. We let the best person win the job. But what has been interesting is there might be assumptions, and every now and then there can be, things like tattoos or things that maybe give you an indicator. But what, really reinforcing that this bias that we all have about what maybe a person coming out of prison looks like or talks like, so many times our hiring managers don't even know, right?
Mm.
And then we leave it up to the individual who works there, whether they want to make their past or the fact that their second chance be public. That's up to them, right? We want to respect their privacy, but we know that they don't need to be ashamed of their past. That's why we exist. And I will say, just like any ministry position or any company, not everybody is a fit, right? Just because they have a record does not mean we're going to hire them. We have a very defined culture, we have very defined cultural values, we have a very defined working culture. And really, what we're looking for is, are you a fit for our culture? And whether they have a record or don't have a record, that's usually the litmus test that determines whether we're going to bring them on, right? Because safety is important, all of these things. But I think what I'm really proud to say and articulate is, despite the fact that 56% of our staff have a record, we have a stellar safety record, an incredibly happy, engaged culture, and employee base. And this isn't something other leaders have to be afraid of if they're ever considering it.
Yeah. So for those, I don't know if you track this separately, maybe you do, for the formerly incarcerated people that come to work on the team, what is the average length of hire?
So, like how long they've stayed at the
Yeah, like
company?
how long they've stayed. Yeah.
Yeah. So we do track and try to benchmark against like retention rates relative to, like, just say industry averages. And ours are better. And I think one of the reasons why it's interesting, like one of our key core values, we say it's the one that is like the foundation of what it means to work at Awake, is the word gratitude. And it's not expecting employees to have gratitude for us for hiring them. It's the opposite of that. It's, I want to hire people who have a grateful outlook on life, that they are grateful for opportunity, for the chance to do hard work. They're grateful for the products we have. They're grateful for their fellow coworkers caring the way they do. And I'm telling you, putting people in buckets, especially people who have done some time in prison, gratitude is something that just emanates out of them. Because I think they know more than the rest of us know how difficult life can be when you're in a cage, and then also how difficult it is to reenter society with some of the challenges and difficulties you had from that time, and the stigma associated with you as you try to get good work. And when they do finally find that work, their gratefulness and gratitude just emanates out of them. And I think because of that, they don't tend to go looking for other jobs. They like to stay. They like to get promoted internally. They become very loyal to the company. And I tell you what, when you're a business leader and the overwhelming emotion you feel from your staff is gratitude, that is a fun workplace to go into every day.
So this sounds kind of utopian, but anyone who has actually done this on any level would know that this is what you're doing is extreme. I don't know if I would say extremely, but it's got its ups and downs.
Yeah.
We'll put it that way. I over the last year, we had a guy attending my church who was fresh out of prison, had been in prison for 10 years.
Mhm.
His license had been suspended, basically revoked permanently. And, but he's a carpenter by trade and just needed some help, needed somebody to believe in him, had a property for him to help us kind of renovate, and it went really well. He was fit. I mean, turning things around, and he had a ride, somebody that was hauling him and all of his tools. That was kind of his carpenter's helper. And that project went really well. So fast forward probably 6 months or so, um, and now he's just changed. He's not the guy that I originally
Mhm.
agreed to have come work on my project. So we've got another house to develop, and in the agreement, I had him sign it, said you will not drive to
Mhm.
this job site because I'm not going to participate in because he had been his license had been taken away because of so many drunk driving and other things that had been on his record. And and I said, you won't drive. I'm not going to participate in that. I will pick you up
Mhm.
every time you come to the job site. I'll pick you up and we'll make it work. And he said, no, I've got rides. I got guys that can take me that help, on the job site and everything. And well, he just didn't do it. And he started driving to the job site. I'm like, I mean, we're not going to do this. He's like, well, this is just the way it is, kind of take it or leave it. And he just flipped.
Mhm.
And it was like, it was a little scary, to be honest with you. And, because he knows my family now, he knows my kids and just felt very unsafe.
Mhm.
And I haven't seen him since. I tried to reach out. I tried to get him to come to this Christian men's event, paid his way. That's another long story, but he just, didn't end up coming. Just a really sad, tragic uh, way that things went down with this particular guy. Um, and it kind of burned me. It kind of jaded me about the whole prospect. Not that he's not the exception here, but
But I
what do
think,
you say to somebody
yeah,
like me in
no, and I
that?
think it's important to articulate that because we've had similar experiences too, right? Where someone starts out with the best intentions, they just need an opportunity and they thrive, and then the complications of their home life and their background and mental health, sometimes that's not enough to keep them on a permanent path. And one of the, I think, most strategic things we did, especially when you've got a big staff that's growing, we're 110 employees or whatever now, is we hired on our HR team a person who was actually he was best man at my wedding, but he was a pastor for about 20 years, and then he was a social worker working with this people group. Well, now he works on our team. Now, we had to go get him OSHA certified so he could run safety for us. But really, what he is a liaison navigating some of the complexities like the ones you just mentioned, right? Of I've had a relapse, or maybe I'm struggling, drugs have re-entered into my life, right? Well, in a previous life where I'm just a business owner or a business leader hired to work for other owners, you size that up as a risk and you say, well, we got to fire this person. Well, when it's your mission to exist for people like this, instead, what we do is we say, hey, if you will go to this rehab facility and follow through on this process, we will save your position here for you, right? And we will give you an opportunity to turn around. And we have had times where that has worked, and we have had times where it hasn't worked, where people were unwilling or they said they were willing and they didn't follow through, right? But what I always like to emphasize is, especially in my previous companies, when I have similar stories of people who did great work and fell apart who didn't have records as well, right? That it's almost this reality of we're sometimes like waiting for that to happen when it's someone who has made mistakes in their past, or especially when they have the checkbox that says, I have a felony record. But it happens a lot with people who don't as well, just because. People are still people. So yeah, it's important to go into anything. Like if there was a leader listening to your podcast that was considering this, to know they're not all going to work out. There will definitely be complications. Um, but I think what has worked well for us is we don't just consider, or we're not just willing to consider people with a record. When it's your mission, it's that unifying focus of no, 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 this is what we signed up for, right? This is what God called us to do. So this may be a little bit, I'll tell you a quick story. We had a moment. So we run a manufacturing company, right? So it's a factory. There's a lot of equipment. It's a swamp cooler. We're in Arizona. It gets pretty hot. And we had one time, this was probably a year in, we had an altercation on the floor where two guys got chippy with each other. They got in a fight. Well, I've worked in manufacturing companies for many years. That's not uncommon on factory floors. But in that moment, I called the entire company together and explained why we have a zero tolerance policy for that. And basically said the whole world is looking at us right now, believing this isn't going to work.
Mm.
Unfortunately, we have more pressure on us to not let things like this happen, right? And I prayed for everybody. We talked it through and really tried to remind people of the whole world expects us to fail, and they expect you to fail because they don't think you're capable of doing great things. We have to prove them wrong, right?
Yeah.
And since that moment, we've had zero altercations in the factory
Wow.
floor versus my old company where we didn't hire a large percentage of second chance employees. We had altercations once a month, right?
Mm.
So it's a reminder that if the culture's right and we're hiring the right people, and again, they're not the right person just because they have a record, they're the right person if they fit our culture. But if we get that right and have a welcoming culture that's set up for them to succeed, hopefully most of the time they can do well, but they certainly don't all work out, and it's sad every time. But we always like to say there's someone else waiting in line who needs the spot that person was unwilling to run with.
Yeah. So those two guys, you said zero tolerance. So
We
it was
fire.
sayonara. Yeah.
Yep. I think it was one of those things where it's like, and another business leader might look at, wait, so you allowed someone who came forward to you to say they were using drugs, they didn't get fired, but someone who fought with someone, and yeah, different cultures, different philosophies. But we know, I mean, this is a humbling thing. A lot of people who are in prison, it's like 1 in 5 are in there for a nonviolent offense, right? Usually it's drugs. So drugs, and then like what's also humbling. So we do this thing, all of our products, they have like a series number. You know, you think like a car, like a BMW, a 3 series, a 5 series. Well, all of our series are a play on a statistic associated with this people group, right? So our 905 series, which is our flagship product, it's our multi-slide, big glass walls that slide away, stands for the fact that 90% of kids who had 5 or more, so 90 and 5, 90% of kids who had 5 or more foster care placements end up in prison, right?
Mm.
And I think a lot of my like Christian brothers and sisters, we think of foster care kids as a tragedy, and we're sad for them and we want to help them, but we think of like people in prison as bad guys. And then when you recognize they're the same person, hopefully that reshifts your perspective on it and you start realizing, okay, this drug behavior is a byproduct of difficult upbringing. And if someone won't stand by them, they're never going to turn this around. And we've got a guy who literally just won Employee of the Month at our All Hands this lounge. Came in for his first year, was great. Around the holidays, we have a shutdown. You know, there's a time they got big bonuses that year. Stumbled into some drugs. Came forward, was honest with us about it. We put him through rehab. He came back. He's now, I think, 2.5 years sober. Um, thriving, has been promoted 3 times. But that 1 week where he had a bad moment after he got out of prison, a year after, he just needed someone to say, "We're not giving up on you yet." Right.
Yeah.
And for us, the payoff was that was we got to keep a great employee who turned it around.
So have you ever been threatened by anyone that you've had to let go, or even somebody that is that you didn't let go?
No, that's a good question because right you do have to fire people sometimes, and
Yeah,
sometimes,
because I mean, there's money at stake here. A
Mhm.
lot, there's somebody's livelihood at stake.
Yep, we it's like anything. Those running a company type decisions where you have to make hard calls, where you get that pit in your stomach and your heart is racing because you know you're about to impact somebody's life. That same feeling exists, right? And I won't even lie. There's been moments at the beginning, especially at the beginning when this was new for us. My wife was one of our co-founders, and she actually runs our HR. Um, so she's in these owning them even more than I am. And some of those first few ones at the beginning, you're like, not some dissimilar to what you said, Darren. Like, these people know me personally. Um, is this a risk to me? And here's what I'll say: we've had no moments of, you know, people showing back up or difficulty. And I think where my wife, her team member Joe, deserve a ton of credit is maybe the people in our pre-screening process that maybe would have been riskier. We've just got a lot of that process right. So usually, and then we have a pretty, I'd say, loving but fair discipline process along the way so that if we're ever asking someone to leave, they're not surprised it's coming. They know, and sometimes they self-manage themselves out. Um, but I mean, truthfully, not utopian, but truthfully, because this has worked so well, we have less turnover and higher retention than any other company I've ever worked at. Partly, I think, because of the mission. So while those hard moments do happen, they happen less than we're used to, which has been really, really great.
Yeah. And this is a $30 million company. I mean, this is not you're not a nonprofit, correct?
No, and that was one thing. So, and maybe other of your listeners might relate to this, but so my whole life, I've wanted to do God's work, right? So much so that in my mid 20s, I actually started in the window business right out of college because I was teaching a Sunday school class, a fifth and sixth grade Sunday school class. And the dad of one of the sons in there was like, "Man, you're a bright kid. Would you come work for me at my window and door company?" And in my late 20s, I was on a mission trip to Brazil where I just felt like God calling me into ministry and I actually left the business world and I worked for a ministry in Africa for a few years. And I really felt like this is what it means to live for God, right? But what was interesting is in that time, I realized that ministry, even if you're working at a ministry, it's still people, different cultures. And I realized, man, I thought this was going to be all perfect and glorious, and God was going to, this was my big moment. My Abraham's about to sacrifice Isaac. I'm giving up all this money to go do ministry, and I realized, wow, this isn't as fulfilling as I thought it would be. And I really felt the call to, you know, try to build something myself. And I think what has been incredibly rewarding for me was that time when I did ministry, one of my main roles was to be a fundraiser. And I struggled with constantly having to ask people for money to do God's work, right? And I know that's a part of the job. And there's a lot of people that are really good at it and how they function. But with Awake and my new company, I didn't want it to be, hey, can you give us money so we can do good work? It was, we're going to build a fantastic product that you are going to love, want, and need. And because we build that great product, we get to do God's work and build and hire people and change their lives and turn it around. And we like to celebrate and thank our customers for the role they play in helping that happen. But we're not asking for a handout for our staff. We're asking for the opportunity for them to have the dignity of hard work. And it's amazing how well our customers have responded to that as well. They are so sold on the mission. And we love that this isn't like a political thing. It's just a human thing.
Yeah.
And for those of us that call ourselves Christian, it's a biblical thing. Um, and our customers from whatever state, because we sell all throughout North America, in whatever political affiliation, they don't care. They all just love that we're trying to help this people group, which has been really cool.
So for those who are listening who are thinking about kind of putting their toe in the water and giving this a try, the government actually does have a bit of a incentive to do that called the Work Opportunity Tax Credit that is going to help just sort of for the onboarding period, I guess, to kind of de-risk the proposition of hiring somebody who you don't know if they're going to work out. I mean, the credit is basically they're gonna pay you to hire this person,
Mhm.
and so it's not really anything out of pocket up front, at least for the first couple of months, right? Is that something that y'all are able to
Yeah, there's a
use?
little bit of, like probably to be expected with regulation. There's a little bit of red tape and process to get
Yeah,
those tax credits, but it's worth it, especially if you're like, we're doing this for the right reasons and the government's, I think the whole reason like that subsidy exists is because the government knows this is a problem and they're trying to incentivize business owners. So that's a good thing to take advantage of if you consider it. Um, and hopefully, like one thing I'd like to say is it's for me as a leader, it's always felt like the morally right thing to do because this is someone, that Jesus died for, right? They're a
yeah,
human. Um, and if they can't get a job, their difficulty in life and the reality for them is very bleak. So it feels morally right to do it. But as business leaders, we like to do things morally right, but we also like to do things that are strategically right. Um, so on that side, it's not just the retention and the culture and the gratitude and the fact that our customers love it. It's also that we have found some of the most talented, highly educated, motivated people that never would have ended up working for a window and door company. That certainly wasn't their career goal, but we found them because they found us because other companies were unwilling to consider them, right?
yeah,
And I'm talking about people who, like, one of our best hires has completely developed using like a Microsoft Power App platform, an entire MRP system that drives our entire business and our data architecture. As someone who was in prison for 16 years, this is a woman who was in the wrong place at the wrong time when she was like 19 years old, right? How many of us also had moments like that, but maybe just bad things didn't happen or we got lucky? And if you were to meet her on the street, you would never think she's been in prison. She's just a kind, fun loving, I always like also like Star Wars loving person who has literally changed our entire company, all because we were willing to give her an opportunity. And that strategic side and the moral side, when those two things are aligned, man, that's powerful. And I feel like it's God ordained.
so people can learn more about how to do this and some other case studies in a book that you referenced before we got on the recording here called Untapped Talent. What else do you want to say about next steps people can take?
Yeah, it's like that's a great book to read. There's usually two books I like to recommend, and it's going back to that, the heart and the mind, the morality and the strategic side. So the Untapped Talent book is a great book for the mind and the strategic side because it's really, really eye-opening about just the millions of people this is that have a record who are really struggling to find work. And some of them have master's degrees and are certainly not a threat or anything to be fearful of, but your processes of risk management just might exclude them. And it's really just about helping you see as a business leader that that exclusion is help really causing you to miss out. So I really recommend that book. It's a great one. And then if you're really trying to have your heart broken for a people group, there's a book called The New Jim Crow that really explores incarceration. And I'm telling you, is one of the most, never cried so much reading a book. So that's a hard recommend. But I know as Christians, sometimes we want God to break our heart because it gives us purpose and direction and clarity. And that was a very important book for me to read, to candidly realize, I think sometimes we think about moments in time or we look back in history of times of discrimination and we think, man, would I have been on the right side of history if I was living in that time? Would I have fought for the least of these? And for me, I started to think a lot about this as a father of how will my kids look at me someday when they're in their 40s and 50s and they're reading about just an overwhelming statistic to me is that the US has 4% of the world's population, but 25% of its prison population. So we lock up more people than any other country, and then we make it really hard for them when they get out. And I personally want to be able to look at my children and say, hey, I tried to help make a difference on this issue. And that's the type of book that after you read it, it's hard to look away. And I think sometimes those are two really good things.
Well, I'm going to get that on Audible right after this interview.
Awesome.
Thank you for that challenging recommendation and for your challenging interview. I'm certainly inspired. Like I said, I had a rough experience over the last year in this department, and I said that I was jaded. I don't know if that's probably not the right word. It was just it was a tough experience, but I know God never gave up on me, and I'm certainly this guy, if I saw him right now, I'd give him a great big hug. I would, I don't know that we'd be able to, work on another. The advantage that you have in your factory is that there's a culture
Yes.
there, and
There's an individual, totally.
There's support, there's accountability. Whereas me working with one contractor is, he's got just too much autonomy, and there's too much. He's just not in the right, especially not having a license. There's so many better environments for him to be in, and it is really sad that he hasn't made the right move there. But I pray that he will. You pray with me on that too. And,
absolutely. And I think what's awesome, Darren, is even hearing the ways you tried to meet him where he's at, and that we talk about that a lot. It's like it's that extra effort, but in the end, they have to make their own choices. But what is also encouraging, and I appreciate your perspective on it, is the next person who maybe has a similar record might be different, right? And that's what we found is at the beginning, especially when we first started, it's like, man, we want to save them all. Please work out. And then you realize some aren't ready to be in that state of mind, but the next person might.
That's right.
So let's give them that opportunity.
That's so well said. AwakeWDC.com is the website where people can learn more about your mission or more about the great, beautiful windows that you are designing for some of the most beautiful, and installing, manufacturing for some of the most beautiful houses in the world.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's just amazing work that you're doing all around, Scott. Thank you so much for challenging us today. It's been a real pleasure.
I enjoyed it, Darren. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Christian Business Leader Podcast. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and tune in for the next episode as we continue exploring God's will and ways for business.